She stressed me out, my wife said, her voice breaking just enough to sound convincing. If he hadn't pushed me, if he'd just listened, maybe our baby would still be here. Every eye in the room snapped to me. My hands went cold. The air felt thick, impossible to breathe through. I stood there in our living room, surrounded by her family, feeling like I'd been shoved into a spotlight I never asked for. No one asked if it was true. No one looked at me with questions in their eyes. They just stared, judging, deciding, condemning. The silence pressed down on me like a physical weight. I wanted to speak, to defend myself, to ask what she meant. But something in the atmosphere told me that anything I said would only make things worse. My wife, Sophia, sat on our couch with her mother's arm wrapped protectively around her shoulders. Her sister stood behind them, arms crossed. Her brother blocked the doorway like a guard. They'd already chosen their side. And I was on the outside. I opened my mouth to speak, then closed it again. What could I possibly say in this moment that wouldn't sound like an excuse? That wouldn't make me look defensive or guilty? The room buzzed with tension. Anger radiated from every corner. Not my anger. I felt numb, disconnected from my own body. Their anger. Hers. A collective fury that had found its target. I felt grief begin to shift inside me, transforming into something sharper. Something that cut from the inside out. This wasn't mourning. This wasn't a family coming together to support each other through loss. This was blame. This was a trial where I'd already been convicted without testimony, without evidence, without a chance to speak. I looked at Sophia, trying to find the woman I'd married 3 years ago. The woman who'd laughed at my terrible jokes and held my hand during scary movies. The woman who'd cried happy tears when we saw those 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test. But that woman wasn't looking back at me. My wife blamed me for her miscarriage and turned our entire family against me, but when the doctor released the report, everything changed. Those words echoed in my head as I stood there, frozen. I could feel the story being written around me. The narrative solidifying with every second of my silence. But something told me not to fight. Not yet. I swallowed my defense. The words I wanted to say stayed trapped in my throat. The explanations. The truth. All of it locked behind my teeth. And I waited. Because sometimes the truth needs time to reveal itself. Sometimes jumping to your own defense only makes you look guilty. Sometimes silence is the only dignity left. Sophia's mother, Patricia, finally broke the standoff. "I think you should leave," she said, her voice cold and final. I nodded slowly. Grabbed my keys from the hall table. Walked out of my own home without a word. Behind me I heard Sophia crying harder. Playing her part perfectly. Nobody followed me to ask my side of the story. My name is David Brooks. I'm not loud. I don't fight in public. I don't make scenes or demand attention. I believe grief deserves gentleness, even when it cuts you. Even when it bleeds you dry. I love my wife. I love the idea of our family. The future we were building together. That's why I didn't interrupt her when she made her accusation. That's why I didn't shout or defend myself or call her a liar in front of her family. I'm the kind of person who thinks before speaking. Who considers consequences. Who tries to understand why people do the things they do, even when those things hurt. My mother always said I was too soft. Too willing to absorb other people's pain. Too quick to blame myself when things went wrong. Maybe she was right. I drove to a hotel near the hospital where I work as a research coordinator. The room was small and impersonal, but it felt safer than the home I'd just left. I sat on the edge of the bed and finally let myself cry. Not just for the baby we'd lost, but for everything that loss had revealed. We'd followed every rule during the pregnancy. Every single one. Appointments marked on the calendar in bright red ink. Prenatal vitamins lined up on the bathroom counter. Rest schedules taped to the refrigerator so we wouldn't forget. Sophia had been anxious from the start. Every twinge, every cramp, every moment of nausea sent her into spirals of worry. I became the calm one. The reassuring presence. When things got hard, when morning sickness made her miserable, when fatigue kept her in bed for days, I became quieter. Less demanding. I took over all the household tasks without being asked. Cooked meals she could stomach. Did laundry at midnight so the noise wouldn't disturb her rest. I thought love meant absorbing pressure. I thought being a good partner meant making myself smaller so she had more room to feel whatever she needed to feel. I stopped talking about my own fears about becoming a parent. Stopped sharing my excitement when it seemed to make her more anxious. Stopped asking for reassurance when I felt scared. I became a support system instead of a person. Looking back now, I wonder if that was my first mistake. The miscarriage happened at 13 weeks. Sophia called me from the bathroom, her voice high and panicked. There was blood. Too much blood. I drove her to the hospital, breaking every speed limit. Held her hand in the emergency room while we waited. Stayed calm while she fell apart. The doctor came in after what felt like hours but was probably only 40 minutes. She was kind but straightforward. Professional but gentle. "I'm very sorry," she said. "There's no longer a heartbeat." The doctor spoke carefully after that, explaining what would happen next. The procedure. The recovery. The follow-up appointments. No blame in her words. No cause identified yet. Just medical facts delivered with compassion. I held Sophia's hand while she sobbed. Made the calls to her family. Arranged time off work for both of us. Filled the prescriptions. Did everything that needed doing. I cried later in the hospital parking lot, sitting alone in my car. Because even in grief I was still trying to be strong enough for both of us. The first week after the loss, Sophia barely spoke. She stayed in bed most days. I brought her food she didn't eat. Sat beside her in silence because I didn't know what else to do. I thought we were grieving together. But then her tone began to change. "You didn't protect me," she said one afternoon, staring at the ceiling. I didn't understand what she meant. Protect you from what? She didn't answer. 2 days later she said it differently. "You always needed everything to be perfect. All those schedules. All those rules. It was too much pressure." "I thought I was helping," I said quietly. "You were controlling." The word hit like a slap. I'd never thought of myself as controlling. I thought I was being supportive, organized, helpful. "I'm sorry," I said, even though I didn't fully understand what I was apologizing for. She just turned away from me. Over the next few days, more accusations came. Small at first, then growing sharper. Each time I apologized. I took responsibility. I tried to understand her perspective. I didn't realize I was being set up. The family dinner happened 2 weeks after the miscarriage. Patricia insisted on it. "The family needs to come together," she'd said on the phone. "Sophia needs support." I agreed, hoping it would help. Hoping that being around people who loved her would ease some of her pain. I was so naive. We gathered at Patricia's house. Sophia's sister Amanda and her brother Christopher were already there when we arrived. The dining room table was set for 6. Dinner started normally enough. Quiet conversation. Careful topics. Nobody mentioned the baby or the loss directly. Then Patricia asked how Sophia was feeling. And that's when my wife told them. Not privately, in whispered conversations I wasn't meant to hear. Not gently, with context and nuance. She told them loudly and clearly that I had caused the miscarriage. "She pushed me constantly," Sophia said, her voice shaking with emotion. "Nothing I did was good enough. Every day was schedules and rules and pressure. My body couldn't take it." I sat frozen, my fork halfway to my mouth. "The doctor said stress can cause miscarriages," she continued. "And she stressed me out every single day." The reaction was immediate. Amanda's face hardened. She looked at me with disgust, then deliberately turned her chair to face away from me. Christopher set down his glass with a sharp crack against the table. Patricia reached for Sophia's hand. "Oh, sweetheart. I had no idea it was that bad." "Wait," I started, my voice barely above a whisper. "That's not." "Not what?" Christopher cut me off. "Not true? You're going to deny it?" "I just want to explain." "There's nothing to explain," Amanda said coldly. "My sister lost her baby because you couldn't give her peace." I felt myself being erased in real time. My truth, my experience, my love, all of it disappearing under the weight of Sophia's narrative. Patricia asked why I had pushed so hard during the pregnancy. Christopher wanted to know why I hadn't noticed Sophia's stress. Amanda questioned whether I'd really wanted the baby, or just wanted control. Each question landed like an accusation. Each assumption painted me as a villain. Sophia cried through all of it, accepting comfort from everyone except me. I sat there, surrounded by people who'd once welcomed me into their family, and felt completely alone. I didn't defend myself that night. I could have. I should have, maybe. But something held me back. Grief twists people, I told myself. It makes them say things they don't mean. Do things they wouldn't normally do. Sophia was in pain, and pain needed somewhere to go. I told myself that over and over as I drove us home in silence. But I also started writing things down. That night, in the small office we'd planned to turn into a nursery, I opened a notebook and began documenting everything I could remember. Every doctor's appointment I'd attended. Every meal I'd cooked. Every task I'd taken on to reduce Sophia's stress. The schedules I'd created at her request because she'd said they helped her feel safe. I wrote down dates and details and conversations. Not because I planned to use them. Not because I wanted ammunition for some future fight. But because I needed to remember. I needed proof, even if just for myself, that I hadn't been the person she was describing. That the narrative being built around me wasn't true. The next morning I called our doctor's office. "I'd like to request copies of all medical records from my wife's pregnancy," I said. The receptionist was professional and helpful. "Of course. For insurance purposes. For personal records," I said carefully. "No problem. I'll need you to fill out a release form since they're not technically your records. Your wife will need to authorize it." My heart sank. What if she won't? Then I'm sorry, but I can't release them without her consent. I hung up and sat in my car thinking. Then I called back. "Actually, I'd like copies of all appointment notes, lab results, and medical recommendations that were given to both of us during appointments. Things I was present for." "Oh, that's different. Let me check what we can provide." I requested every medical note from every appointment, every lab result, every recommendation the doctor had made to both of us. I didn't accuse anyone of anything. I just asked questions, gathered information, built my own record of the truth. If this narrative was going to continue, I needed to be prepared. Sophia's confidence grew over the following weeks. She told her friends what happened, then her cousins, then people at work. The story spread through her social circles like wildfire. Each time she told it, the details got simpler and harsher. The nuance disappeared. The complexity of grief vanished. I became a one-dimensional villain in a story designed to explain away her pain. "He controlled everything," she told her best friend on a phone call I accidentally overheard. The pregnancy became about him, not me. "He wouldn't let me rest," she told her cousin at a coffee shop where I'd gone to pick up our order. "Always pushing, always demanding." None of it was true. But truth didn't matter when the alternative was so much easier to digest. I became the villain because it simplified her grief. Because it gave her somewhere to direct the unbearable pain of losing our baby. Because anger is sometimes easier than sadness. I understood it. But understanding didn't make it hurt less. And I didn't stop her. I let the story spread, let my reputation crumble, let people believe the worst about me. Because I was still hoping she'd realize what she was doing. That she'd wake up one day and remember who I actually was. I was still hoping love would win. 3 weeks after that terrible family dinner, my phone rang. "Miss Brooks? This is Nurse Caroline from Dr. Mitchell's office." My heart immediately started racing. "Is everything okay?" "Yes, everything's fine. I'm calling because some test results from your wife's recent visit have been finalized. The pathology report came back, and Dr. Mitchell wanted to schedule a follow-up appointment to discuss the findings." "What kind of findings?" "I can't discuss specifics over the phone, but your wife authorized the release of information to you as her spouse. Would you be able to come in this Friday?" I checked my calendar. "Yes, I can make that work." After I hung up, I sat very still. My heart didn't race with anxiety. It didn't pound with fear. It settled. Somehow, instinctively, I knew this call was important. That these results might matter in ways I couldn't yet understand. I didn't tell Sophia about the call. She'd been staying at her mother's house more than ours lately anyway. We'd barely spoken in days. But I kept that appointment time locked in my mind. The report arrived by mail 2 days before the appointment. I opened the envelope with shaking hands, not sure what to expect. The medical terminology was dense, but the conclusion was clear. The cause of the miscarriage was identified. A chromosomal abnormality, a random genetic error that had nothing to do with external factors. The report specifically noted that it was unpreventable. Not caused by stress, physical activity, diet, or any environmental factor. Medical. Unpreventable. Documented. No stress trigger mentioned anywhere in the detailed analysis. No external fault identified. And certainly nothing that pointed to me. I read it 3 times, letting the words sink in. Then I carefully folded it back into the envelope and put it in my desk drawer. I felt strange. Not vindicated exactly, because vindication felt too selfish when we'd lost a baby. But relieved. Confirmed. Solid in a way I hadn't felt since that terrible family dinner. The truth was written in medical terms on official letterhead. My innocence wasn't just a feeling anymore. It was a fact. I didn't send the report to Sophia. I didn't forward it to her family or post it on social media or confront anyone with it. I just held on to it. Kept it safe. Waited. Because I knew there would be a moment when the truth mattered more than my need to prove it. That moment came when Sophia insisted her entire family attend the follow-up appointment with Dr. Mitchell. "I need support," she told me over the phone. "The doctor wants to discuss the results and I can't do it alone." "I'll be there," I said. "I mean my family. My real support system." The word stung, but I didn't react. "Okay. I'll see you there." The day of the appointment, I dressed carefully. Wore my most professional outfit. Brought my folder with copies of the report, my documented timeline, and notes from every appointment. I didn't plan to weaponize any of it. I just needed to feel prepared. To feel like I had solid ground under my feet for whatever came next. The waiting room felt too small for all of us. Patricia sat on one side of Sophia, Amanda on the other. Christopher stood near the door, arms crossed like he was guarding against my escape. I sat across from them, alone. Sophia's hand reached for mine suddenly, a gesture that caught me off guard. Her fingers were cold. But the touch felt performative. Like she was showing her family that she was trying. That she was being the bigger person by including me. Her mother watched the gesture with approval. Amanda nodded slightly as if Sophia was being generous by allowing me this small contact. I held her hand but felt nothing. The connection we'd once had was gone, replaced by this hollow pantomime of partnership. I held my folder like an anchor. Physical proof that I hadn't imagined the past months. That my version of events was real and documented and true. The nurse called us back. Dr. Mitchell's office was larger than the exam rooms, with a desk and comfortable chairs arranged in a semicircle. We all filed in. A family united in grief but divided in blame. Dr. Mitchell greeted us warmly but professionally, her eyes taking in the tension immediately. "Thank you all for coming," Dr. Mitchell began. "I know this has been an incredibly difficult time." She opened a file on her desk, the same report I had in my folder. "I wanted to go over the pathology results from the miscarriage and answer any questions you might have." Patricia leaned forward. "Will this explain what caused it?" "Yes," Dr. Mitchell said carefully. "The testing was very thorough, and we were able to identify the cause." She explained the chromosomal abnormality in terms we could all understand. A random genetic error that occurred during cell division. Something that happens in a significant percentage of pregnancies, especially first pregnancies. "These abnormalities are spontaneous," she continued. "They're not caused by anything the parents did or didn't do." Amanda interrupted. "But stress can cause miscarriages, right? I've read that online." Dr. Mitchell's expression remained neutral. "There's a common misconception about stress and pregnancy loss. Let me be very clear about what the science actually shows." She pulled out a printed sheet with research citations and began speaking gently but firmly. She answered questions before accusations could fully form. Facts filled the room like light displacing shadows. Dr. Mitchell set down her papers and looked directly at all of us. "I want to be very clear," she said, her voice kind but firm. "There is nothing your spouse did, or didn't do, that caused this miscarriage." The words hung in the air. The chromosomal abnormality was present from conception. It was going to result in pregnancy loss regardless of stress levels, activity levels, diet, or any external factor. This was not preventable. She looked at Sophia specifically. "I know you've been struggling with feelings of guilt and blame. That's completely normal after a loss. But I need you to understand that this was a medical event, not something caused by anyone's actions." The silence in the room was physical. Heavy. Suffocating. Patricia's hand, which had been resting protectively on Sophia's shoulder, slowly withdrew. Amanda stopped staring at me and turned to look at her sister instead. Christopher shifted his weight, his arms uncrossing, his defensive posture deflating. "But she told us," Patricia started. "Whatever you were told," Dr. Mitchell interrupted gently, "the medical evidence is clear. This loss had a specific biological cause that had nothing to do with environmental stress or interpersonal dynamics." I watched Sophia's face carefully, waiting for relief, for acknowledgement, for something. Instead I saw panic. Amanda was the first to break the silence. "Sophie," she said quietly, "did you hear what the doctor said?" Sophia nodded, but her eyes were wide and unfocused. Amanda looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in weeks. I saw confusion replace the certainty that had lived in her expression since that family dinner. "So it wasn't?" Amanda trailed off. "No," Dr. Mitchell confirmed. "The miscarriage was not caused by stress or any actions taken by either parent." Christopher stepped away from the door, his defensive stance completely gone. He rubbed his face with both hands, looking suddenly exhausted. Patricia's lips pressed into a thin line. She glanced between Sophia and me, and I saw something shift in her eyes. Not quite understanding yet, but the beginning of a question. The realization was spreading through the room like cracks in ice. Each person processing at their own speed, arriving at their own uncomfortable conclusions. If the miscarriage wasn't caused by stress, then why had Sophia said it was? Why had she blamed me so specifically? So publicly? I stayed quiet. Let them work through it. Let the facts do the work my words never could have done. Sophia started crying. But this time the sound was different. Louder. More desperate. Less controlled. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry. I couldn't." Patricia moved to comfort her daughter, but hesitated. Amanda didn't move at all. "I was in so much pain," Sophia continued through her tears. "And I needed it to make sense. I needed someone to blame because otherwise it just happened for no reason and I couldn't." Her words dissolved into incoherent sobbing. Dr. Mitchell stood and got a box of tissues, passing them to Sophia with professional sympathy. But even the doctor's expression had shifted slightly. She'd heard enough to understand there was more happening here than just grief. "Grief can make us look for explanations that bring comfort," Dr. Mitchell said carefully. "It's a normal human response to try to find meaning in tragedy." But this time no one rushed to comfort Sophia. No one gathered around her with unconditional support. Christopher was staring at his shoes. Amanda had her arms wrapped around herself. Patricia looked like she wanted to speak but couldn't find words. The protective circle that had formed around Sophia at that family dinner had broken. And I hadn't done anything except tell the truth. The apologies came afterward in the parking lot. Amanda approached me first while Sophia sat in Patricia's car, still crying. "I'm sorry," Amanda said, not quite meeting my eyes. "I shouldn't have assumed. I should have asked questions instead of just believing." "It's okay," I said, though it wasn't really. "No, it's not." She finally looked at me. "I treated you terribly. We all did. And you didn't deserve it." Christopher joined us, hands shoved in his pockets. "Yeah, sorry. I was out of line at dinner. And after." Their apologies were awkward. Incomplete. They didn't erase the damage or restore what had been broken. But they came. Patricia took longer. She stood beside her car, watching her daughter cry, and I could see her struggling with something. Finally she walked over. "I'm sorry for what I said," she began. "I was trying to protect Sophia. I thought." "You thought I hurt her," I finished. "Yes." Patricia looked older suddenly. Tired. "And I was wrong." The apologies didn't feel triumphant. They felt sad. Like we'd all lost something that could never be fully recovered. Trust. Innocence. The simplicity of relationships before tragedy tested them. Patricia walked back to her car where Sophia was waiting. Through the windshield I saw Patricia lean in and say something. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw Sophia's reaction. Her face crumpled. Fresh tears came. Patricia's expression was serious. Not angry but firm. The look of a mother who loved her daughter but needed her to face an uncomfortable truth. Later Amanda told me what Patricia had asked. "Why would you say that about her?" The question Sophia couldn't answer. Or wouldn't answer. Because how do you explain that you turned your grief into a weapon? That you took your partner's love and twisted it into blame? That you needed a villain so badly you created one? Sophia never gave her mother a real answer that day. She just cried harder and said she was sorry over and over until the words lost all meaning. I stood in that parking lot and watched the family that had turned against me struggle with the reality of what had happened. And I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly. Not yet. But release. I'd carried their accusations like stones for weeks. Their assumptions. Their judgment. Their anger. Now those stones were sliding off my shoulders one by one. The truth had freed me. Sophia's carefully constructed story collapsed that afternoon. Not because I exposed her, I'd barely said a word during the entire appointment. But because truth doesn't need defending forever. Eventually, it rises to the surface on its own. The lie had been built on assumption and emotion. It had spread quickly because grief makes people want simple explanations. Because families rally around the one who seems most hurt. But facts are stubborn things. Medical reports don't care about emotional narratives. Science doesn't bend to make us feel better. The chromosomal abnormality was documented. The cause was clear. And no amount of grief could change those fundamental truths. Over the next few days, Sophia's story unraveled completely. Friends who'd heard her version started asking questions. Family members began remembering moments that didn't fit her narrative. People realized they'd believed something without evidence, convicted someone without trial. Some reached out to apologize. Others just quietly disappeared from my life, too embarrassed to acknowledge their mistake. Sophia stopped telling her story. Stopped posting vague, accusatory things on social media. Stopped accepting sympathy that was based on a lie. The silence was deafening. And I realized something important. I didn't need anyone to rebuild my reputation. The truth had done that work without my help. I moved out 2 weeks after the doctor's appointment. Not because Sophia asked me to. Not because her family pressured me. But because I finally understood that our marriage had died along with the baby we'd lost. Some things can't be repaired. Some betrayals cut too deep. Sophia had taken the most painful moment of my life and weaponized it. She'd turned my love into a liability. She'd painted me as a villain to everyone who mattered. And even though she'd been caught, even though the truth had come out, I couldn't unsee what she'd been willing to do. I packed my essentials while she was at work. Left the furniture and the dishes and most of the shared things we'd collected over 3 years. I took my clothes, my books, my personal items. The things that were undeniably mine. And I left a copy of the medical report on the kitchen counter. Not as a weapon. Not as a final jab. But as a reminder. Of what happened. Of what was true. Of the price we'd both paid for her choice to lie. Nothing else felt necessary. I didn't leave a note. Didn't stage a dramatic exit. Just quietly removed myself from a situation that had become toxic. Sophia never contacted me again after I moved out. No calls. No texts. No attempts at explanation or reconciliation. Maybe she was too ashamed. Maybe she'd convinced herself I was still somehow at fault. Maybe she just wanted to move on and pretend none of it had happened. I didn't know. And eventually I stopped wondering. And that's how I healed. Not through confrontation or revenge. Not through public vindication or dramatic justice. But through distance. Through time. Through choosing to release the anger and hurt I'd been carrying. I learned something crucial in those months after I left. Grief doesn't excuse cruelty. Pain doesn't justify weaponizing someone else's love. And being hurt doesn't give you permission to hurt back. Sophia had been grieving. I understood that. But she'd also made a choice, to turn her pain outward, to blame me instead of facing the randomness of loss. And love doesn't require becoming someone else's shield. It doesn't mean absorbing accusations you don't deserve. It doesn't mean sacrificing your truth for someone else's comfort. If someone needs to destroy your name to survive their pain, let them try. But hold on to your truth. Document it. Protect it. Because eventually truth outlives lies. I know my worth now. I know what I did and didn't do. And I don't carry blame that was never mine to carry. The medical report proved my innocence. But more importantly, I'd always known the truth about who I was. And that knowledge was enough. Kindly like and subscribe to our channel.